Welcome back, guys. I owned a B7 RS4 for about 4 years, and I never did this video because back then I didn't have a YouTube channel. Don't really have a YouTube channel now, it's more of a hobby, but I should have done it. So I'm getting around to it now, and this one is really more just for people that might be wanting to buy one and want a bit of thoughts and advice from a previous owner. Okay, so in my opinion, the B7 of the RS4 generation was the sweet spot of the RS cars. The B5, that's epic. It's a great car, twin turbo, 2.7, notorious for breaking down and very expensive to maintain. So they're great cars. You're not going to lose money in terms of depreciation on those cars, but you probably will in terms of just the general maintenance and the running costs of them. Not saying B7s are cheap when they go wrong, I'll get into that shortly, but B5s are known for it. The B8s, they moved across from the manual gearbox to the S-tronic. I think it was a 7-speed, and again that was a weak spot, and it just, yeah, it was the last of the V8s, but the fact there was no manual available. The B7 really was just the ultimate platform. The 4.2 litre FSI V8, the 6-speed manual, the sonorous noise it made, it was just, yeah, the whole platform, how it handled, how it sounded, it was perfect, and that's why I went for mine. In terms of the performance, 0 to 60 takes around 4.5-ish seconds. You can rev them to close to 8,000 RPM, and that was like a real kind of selling point for me. It's just literally you put your foot down and it just builds and builds and builds, and the sound it makes, it's nothing like a turbo, just that the whole naturally aspirated experience of a high revving V8, you really can't beat that. Now, like I said, I owned mine for 4 years, and it was mostly trouble-free. Those 4 years were great. When it heard me say I'm going to sell it, all these things started going wrong with it, and it's unfortunate because there are some common faults that do go wrong with the B7s that you do need to look out for if you're considering buying one. The two big ones are the DRC, which is the suspension. You get leaks on them, and if you do, it's expensive, very, very expensive. Normally you have to either just take it into Audi and they'll just ask you to empty your wallet. You can try and do a claim, try and say that it's like a known fault, but you're going to argue with a brick wall. Sometimes they might be kind and give you a little bit towards it, but as these cars are becoming older and older, chances of that are, you know, slim to zero. You can put coilovers on, like I say, a lot of people do that. That just removes the DRC completely and you don't have to worry about it. So yeah, if you are looking for a car, check that the DRC has either been maintained, has been checked, or has been removed, and you've got coilovers instead. The other big one is the oil cooler. Both of these went wrong on mine within the space of a month when I was about to sell it. The DRC started leaking and the oil cooler pipes, they just start to like melt. It's bizarre. Audi did something along the lines of they used 2 different types of metal that over time eat away at each other, which doesn't really make sense, but because of that, the metal literally just falls apart and the oil starts leaking out of it. You do have to change the oil cooler. Some places will attempt to repair the pipes, but it's very much 50-50. If not, then you may as well just upgrade it to like a forged oil cooler or something and be done with it. The only other major thing to look out for is really just whether the car's been carbon cleaned. Now, the 4.2 litre V8 FSIs, they were known for their carbon buildup, and the problem is when you get the carbon buildup in them, they don't produce the BHP quoted. Now, there is an argument that the RS4 B7 never produced 420 horsepower. People have put it on the dynos, and very often it's come out at like 400, even less, you know, 390. And with the carbon buildup, often it's even less. Now mine, I never got carbon cleaned. I never felt it was underpowered. But if yours doesn't feel like a 400 brake horsepower plus car, then it could well be there's a carbon buildup. There are now multiple companies that will help with that, and they'll do carbon cleans. MRC Tuning up in Banbury, I think they are the best for that. What they'll generally do is carbon clean and also remap it, and you will see, you'll genuinely then get 420 to even 440 horsepower from your car, which will feel like night and day if you've got a bucket load of carbon build up in it and it's putting out, like, I think some people in the forums were as low as like 360, 370 horsepower, which is shocking on a 420 OEM, you know, out the factory quote. Little things you need to be looking for when you're shopping, things like the seat. Now when you press the sport button, you'll notice that the bolsters, the side bolsters in the seat kind of tighten up. Make sure they work when you press the sport button. If they don't, it's expensive. So yeah, always check, press the sport button, the seats will compress around your kind of ribs. It's a really cool little feature, and I love that about mine. Important to note that might only be with the wing backs. I'm not sure. Mine had the wing backs and the flat bottom steering wheel. They also did the standard seats. I don't think they probably did them on that. They might do, but it's definitely the wing backs, and you want to buy it with wing backs and a flat bottom steering wheel anyway. If you don't, you're going to struggle with resale, because that type of car, people are looking for those lovely wing backs and the lovely flat bottom steering wheel. Going back to pressing the sport button, when you press that, the exhaust flap should also open as well. So maybe take a mate or have the person that's selling it press the sport button whilst you're on your knees at the back of the car looking and what's happening with the flaps. Sometimes they get stuck. You need to get a screwdriver in and a bit of WD-40 or oil and try and, you know, loosen them off. But yeah, it's very important. You want to check them and make sure they are working when you're buying it. If you're buying it to use properly, then you want to be looking at getting the Sport Suspension Plus. I always knew it as SS Plus. It's one upgrade that really can make a big difference to the handling of the car. Mine sat quite low. I'm led to believe it did drop it by about 20 mil. Some people say it doesn't, but I'm pretty sure the SS Plus did have a lower ride height, and it was just a firmer ride. It was a little bit crashy going over some bumps, but in general it was a good trade-off. That thing handled remarkably well. Obviously check the history with a fine-tooth comb, make sure it's been well maintained. If you notice there's quite a few invoices in there from the likes of MRC Tuning, then chances are it's had quite a good life and it's been well maintained. When you take it out for a test drive, and do take it out for a test drive obviously, what you want to be looking for is when you're accelerating past 5,000 RPM quite hard, you should notice there's almost like a turbo kick in your back as you go past 5,000 RPM. If you're not getting that turbo kick, obviously it's not turbo, but if you're not getting that kind of kick in the back, then there's a good chance that the intake flaps aren't opening, and again, that is quite a big job. So yeah, it's quite hard to describe, but you'll notice it. 5,000 RPM, you'll get like a turbo feeling, which is bizarre because it's naturally aspirated, but it's to do with the intake flaps opening. That does also have something to do with the fact that with the standard map on it, Audi don't give full power in the first 3 gears, which is bizarre. Obviously it's to protect the engine, but if you take it to the likes of MRC Tuning, when they remap it, they will give you full power in all of those first 3 gears. They can also map out the cold start, which my neighbours hated because I had a performance exhaust on it, and it was like a straight piped pretty much all the way through. It was so loud. The cold start, it revs the engine at like about 1,800 RPM, and it was just a sweet spot. We go, it was so loud, and yeah, like I said, my neighbours hated me for it. So they can map that out, so it literally just be a cold start at like 1,000 RPM, which is nice if you want to keep up your relations with your neighbours. Also, if you're worried about road tax, look for an earlier car. Believe it or not, in the UK at least, I think it's like 2005, there was a switchover, and it gets very expensive from, I think it's 2006 onwards. So if you can get one of the early B7 RS4s, it's exactly the same as like 2007, but the only difference is it bizarrely falls into the cheaper tax bracket. So you save like 200 quid a year currently. Obviously it might change, but yeah, you can save a little bit on your tax by going for an early year car. Now the B7 is just an ultimate super saloon in my eyes. But like with most cars, when you buy them, you want to make them better. You want to kind of, you know, modify them and tune them a little bit. So there are a few little subtle mods you can do to the B7 once you've owned it and had a bit of fun with it, that I highly recommend, and I did these to mine as well. Now, the first one, obviously it's got V8, the standard OEM exhaust. You can do 2 things. If you don't want to spend a load on getting a new exhaust, you can do what's called I think it's like a piggy modification. But you unplug the vacuum pipes. Basically, it stops the flaps from working and it leaves the flaps open constantly. So the one important thing to remember is that you must bung up the vacuum pipes, the holes of the vacuum pipes. If not, you'll start getting vacuum leaks and it affects other things in the car. But you'll notice the car is lovely and it just has a deeper growl to the exhaust note, and you've spent nothing apart from like a couple of nails that need to go in and seal it all off. Obviously, if you want to go full on, then do get a performance exhaust. I would recommend getting a resonated one. I had a non-resonated one, which is basically the middle resonator. It wasn't there, and it did drone. But that said, it sounded amazing on full chat. So it depends. If you're bothered about drone, yeah, get a resonator. Otherwise, you're not bothered, just non-resonate, and again, your neighbours will just either hate you or move out. Quite a few owners changed the tyres. They actually went wider. The standard setup from the factory is 255/40 by 19s. My car actually came with 275/30 19s, so it's like 2 centimeters wider all around. And 275s at the front, it made a hell of a difference. It actually dialed out all of the understeer because you got a very, very heavy V8 at the front, and that was one of the kind of criticisms of the B7. It understeered too easily. 275s on the front, obviously on the rear as well, it made a big difference. That car was so planted. I think that combined with the SS Plus suspension, you could not fault that car going through the bends. You could chuck it into pretty much any corner, any speed within reason, and it would be fine. And I do think a lot of that was because of the 275s all around. Like I said at the start, if the DRC goes, probably just switch it out for coilovers. It's a massive improvement again. The DRCs are brilliant, but yeah, if they go, it's stupid expensive, so just change them to coilovers. Consider definitely getting it carbon clean and remapped to MRC. 100%, that makes a big difference, and especially if your car's underpowered. Always run the car in super unleaded. I always did with mine, like V-Power or Momentum. The only other advice I'd really give you if you're looking at buying one would first of all be, like with most big V8s, let the engine warm up before you go thrashing it. You don't want to be causing undue damage, trying to rev the nuts off it when it's cold. Try not to use it just for short runs. I fell victim of that a little bit because I used to use it for the school run. Epic school run car, but it's only like a mile to and from the school, so not ideal. The car doesn't really warm up, and that can be one of the causes of the carbon buildup. Just make sure you take it out if you do. Stretch its legs. You know, you don't need more of an excuse to go out and have a nice fast drive on a Sunday morning. And just in general, if you're thinking about buying one, don't think twice. Honestly, V8s aren't going to be around forever. The government keep putting up the road tax every year. The bigger the engine, the more expensive it's going to be. We're going to get priced out of driving V8s at some point, so just enjoy them whilst you can. So I'm going to leave the video there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, drop a comment below, consider subscribing if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you soon.